Ugh, tired of Boomy. Think I'm just going to heal from now on. Man, Druid sucks.
Hey man, why aren't you playing Feral?
Cause Feral is bad, dude.
Nah, check the logs, fool. Feral is doing better than Space Chicken and Death Knights, and it's almost as good as Hammer. Just be a pussy, man.
Pussy? I don't get it.
Yeah, you never will. But at least you'll get talents, gear, essences.
Yeah, rotation and all that. I know.
More!
And then more short. Fuck off. Now let's get this video started, man. Before diving right into it, a quick disclaimer and shout out. The guide will cover the main things you need to know, giving you some proper fundamentals for the spec. Thanks to Guiltiest, who fact-checked and made some recommendations, you can be sure your ass is getting the right shit. Am I a master word player? A master of clickbait? A master bait? On the first row, you start with Sabertooth, increasing the damage your bite does and extending the duration of rip on your target by 4 seconds per combo point. Considering you'll be using bite with 5 combo points, you are essentially reapplying rip without actually casting rip, saving you 5 combo points and instead giving you an extra bite that would otherwise be a rip. It's an easy talent to use, makes for those sweet big bites pop on your screen to let you know the spec is good. The alternative, mostly in dungeons, is Predator, which works really well on bosses like Hivemind, where AoE is aplenty. The idea with this talent is that you get more Tiger's Fury cast the longer you stay in combat. It performs amazing in AoE since you won't have as much time to bite when dealing with multiple targets. There's also a catch. When you do dungeons, you kind of want your tank to chain pull back to back, since the longer you are out of combat and not doing anything, the worse this talent becomes. Sabertooth is still good in dungeons though. Next up is the first utility role where all options are viable. The default one though is Wild Charge, which acts like a charge mixed with a Shadow Step. It's helpful when you have to run away from the boss to drop some random shit outside the raid, or for any other reason, helping you get back in action really quick. Tiger Dash is a major sprint option for a short duration. Can be very useful in tight situations where you just need a burst of speed to get through mechanics really quick. It replaces the normal dash but reduces its cooldown to 45 seconds. The last option is Renewal. You can take this when you don't really have to move, but you are still taking high amounts of damage. It's a bit more situational, but useful nonetheless. Third row is the Affinity row, and the best option here is Balance Affinity. This will increase the range of your abilities, particularly the melee ones. And what this does is let you hit the boss from farther away, making it easier to move, dodge shit, and still be in range. It also increases your AoE radius, which helps in dungeons where pulls are often and a bit more chaotic. The other options are good as well when you need to be a bit more defensive, but Balance Affinity is just too good to pass out. Row number 4, yet more utility. What, are you new to Druid? All options here are viable, yet some are very situational. Overall, Typhoon will be your most used one. Pushing mobs back gets them in and out of position, interrupts casts, and helps you or your tank to get away from them. Use your imagination, be creative. Mass Entanglement is an instant AoE route. This can be good on ads such as the bots in Junkyard at the last boss, can root the thing from beyond if you run a lot of corruption, and it's useful in general mob control. Bash will be of little use in general sense. The single target stun is good, but there are other classes that provide this without sacrificing something amazing like Typhoon for it. On the 5th row, you have Soul of the Forest as the currently best performing option in the tier. Using a finishing move grants you 5 energy per combo point spent, so 25 ideally, with a 5% times 5 combo points extra damage. With Sabertooth on the first row, your bites will pack quite a bite, and it will smooth out your rotation since energy starvation is maybe the only real inconvenience of the spec. Not as bad as previous patches though. Incarnation is a specific option that works with Vision of Perfection Major. It's a different playstyle, you can try it, but not one we will recommend and discuss in this video, but it's still worth mentioning. Next up we have the 6th row, and it's generally the AoE focus row. With that in mind, in raid you want to take Brutal Slash since it's the highest single target damage option on the row. It replaces Swipe and still hits in AoE, but the single target damage it has is pretty beefy. Primal Wrath will be your actual AoE option that you will run pretty much in all mythic keys and raid bosses like Hivemind that have constant add spawns. The benefit of applying grip to everything around you outclasses any other option on the row, and this will be your main finisher when fighting more enemies at once. Lastly, we end the build with Blood Talent. When you cast a Regrowth or Entangling Roots, your next 2 melee abilities will deal 25% more damage, this applying to bleeds as well. Because of Predatory Swiftness, you have an incentive to cast a Regrowth, usually before every finisher to empower it. Couple this with Soul of the Forest and Sabertooth and your bites will be killer! Some people don't like the playstyle of always casting a heal on you instead of doing damage, although it increases survivability as well, so Moments of Clarity is a good alternative. It increases your energy cap, increases the damage you do with Shred, Thrash, and Swipe, or Brutal Slash if you have it talented, and essentially works on your Omen of Clarity passive, and you can pair it even better with Predator on the first row since you aren't focusing on damping all your damage into finishers anymore. Personally, I prefer Blood Talent since it makes the rotation more interesting, but does indeed add a risk factor where you can mess up and end up losing damage. Up to you though. Until Shadowland hits, the general consensus is that you want to sim your stats to get the accurate depiction of their priority. Why? Well, because the stats are so well balanced with each other that either one can surpass the other once you take too much of one thing. With that being said, keeping a good balance between them can also prevent one stat becoming way worse than the others, from a mathematical standpoint at least. The general priority sees Critical Strike at the very top, followed by Mastery, then Versatility with Haste and Agility finishing the list. This doesn't mean you can go with 10,000 crit and forget the rest. If you start to get too much crit and Mastery, you will notice Versatility being better and better for you. Does this make sense? I hope so. Also, a quick side note, if you play with corruption effects that deal flat damage bursts, Mastery will lose value since it mainly helps you with bleed damage and finisher move damage, of which the corruption effects are neither. We can get really nitty-gritty about stats since their value can even change for AoE, but we will keep the video on a simpler side since optimizing stat priority to the point will net you a few percentages of DPS more as long as you still keep to the list we gave you just before. Taking the stats discussion forward, you can start using consumables based on what performs the best, or the stat that will round up and keep a good balance. For the purpose of the guides, we will showcase the crit variants, but feel free to not feel locked into them. A Chord of Critical Strike and Deadly Lava Lazuli will be your main options here as ring enchants and gems for socketing needs. Make sure that at least one socket has the Leviathan's Eye of Agility though. Since they are the most common and cheapest options, they will be the easiest to manage and replace in case your stats change. Your weapon will have the Force Multiplier enchant that procs agility but also your highest secondary stat. Overall, this is the most solid option, but feel free to play with alternatives if you want. The flask will be the Greater Flask of the Currents, with the best potion to use being Unbridled Fury. There are other DPS potions in the game, but this one seems to be performing the best at the moment. The best food to use will be the McDowell's Big Mac for the crit bonus, but if your raid group is freely passing feasts, you can also use them as alternatives. Mastery seems pretty close to crit for me, so keep in mind that if you do end up with way more crit than Mastery, you can always swap these options for their masterful counterparts. Moving into Azerite builds, there are generally two main builds to focus on, one for raiding and one for Mythic Plus. Sure, there are variations and you can sim most options. In raids, however, you want Jungle Fury 3 times. This further boosts Tiger's Fury potency by popping a big critical strike boost, which obviously stacks 3 times. The other 3 slots are usually generic stat boosts, since really, Jungle Fury is the one you really want. Heart of Darkness stacked is very good if you have at least 20 corruption, which isn't difficult to get. the actual options you want is while flesh rending stacked as well. Thing is, while flesh rending performs really well in AoE, which is most of the raid boss fights, but loses a lot of value the fewer you have stacked. So either stack it without sacrificing Jungle Fury, or take generic stat traits, preferably those giving crit or mastery, of which there are a few. In dungeons, you will build similarly. Jungle Fury 3 times is pretty much baseline everywhere, while flesh rending stacked as much as possible will be your second on the list. If you don't have these in all slots, you can take one-off traits like Gushing Laceration or Untamed Ferocity. These particular options have procs that do not stack outside the flat damage increase, so getting one of them is usually enough. Choosing your essences follows the same logic, where you want a build for raids and one for dungeons, where you either prioritize single target damage or AoE respectively. When raiding, you can go with World Vein Resonance Major. Yeah, pretty cool, huh? I guess the 300% extra main stat is a big buff from the 50% last patch. This works even better with other people using it in your raid, and chances are there will be people using this since this is good for a lot of specs. You can opt for Blood of the Enemy as an alternative, which works good on ad fights. And let's be honest, we already discussed that there are more ad fights and AoE encounters than non-ad fights and AoE encounters in the raid. As for minor options, Memory of Lucid Dreams will help you with energy regeneration, plus a cute versatility proc. Conflict and Strife is a big boy versatility proc, and Breath of the Dying is the new DPS essence that seems better at rank 1 than most current rank 3 options, and provides the added 10 corruption resistance. In dungeons, you want Blood of the Enemy Major as your numero uno option if possible. It's a shit grind, I know, I don't have it either at rank 3, but I would have grinded it if Feral would have been my main dispatch. But hey, all is not lost. As a replacement, you can take Meme Beam for that AoE burst damage. The minors will be similar with Memory of Lucid Dreams and the Breath of the Dying. Purification Protocol is a good DPS increase, while Conflict and Strife can be a more defensive one, although versatility still provides offensive power. Aside from the majors, the minor options can be played with and you can see what works best for you. Some of them are fairly obvious that are very good, such as Blood of the Enemy giving you a crit engine like no other. So pick and choose, but ideally you want them at rank 3 since all of them are recommendations, taking into consideration you do have them at rank 3. Otherwise, use the highest rank options available. The trinkets have become more and more interesting, and now there's even a larger pool to choose from. If you raided in Palace or have the option to raid now at least Heroic, you can use Ashvane's Coral and Dribbling Inkpot for your raiding setup. It provides still one of the best single target setups, especially if you can get these trinkets at a mythic eye level. Don't forget, they can still Titan Forge. Otherwise, you can use mythic plus trinkets that boost crit and mastery, trinkets like Spyglass, Harlan's Loaded Dice, and Electromantle in a jar specifically for AoE fights in ny'alotha. The current raid trinkets are good, but don't really see much play. Some of them are focused on haste, others have damage procs, and Feral doesn't really value them as much as other specs do. At least if the eye level is enough, though, you could use them. If anything, some are fun to use in different situations, and based on their design, it's not always straightforward which one will be the best. 100% of the time, though. In Mythic Plus, things are a bit more consistent, in that there's always AoE fights, and the AoE fights will always be the majority of encounters. Torment in a jar is something that can work really well and drops in the first half of ny'alotha, if you are raiding, of course. Other good options again come from dungeons. Deadeye Spyglass is a crit factory, while the remote guidance device from Junkyard has a big AoE damage proc that has seen more and more play the more people get their hands on it. All of the trinket recommendations are to give you an idea of what they do and what to aim for. Don't feel like your spec cannot work without them though. After the recent corruption nerfs, some weapons have lost their value for Feral, one such being the ny'alotha, the polearm with Echoing Void. It's good if you don't have any other option, but probably will be cleansed once you get better variations, of which there are a few. One weapon that has become instantly better after the Echoing Void nerf is Anzigvra. I like saying these. This staff comes with Devour Vitality Corruption, where you deal 2% of your HP to the enemy and healing you for that amount with a 25% proc chance on auto attacks. This drops from Maut, the second raid boss, so fairly easy to farm as opposed to the previous option. Just to clear the air, Infinite Stars are mathematically the best single target corruption option. The issue with it is that if you are in combat with a second target and a third and so on, if you cleave onto them, Infinite Stars can also proc on them, so instead of building stacks on your main target for more and more damage, you are spreading stacks for very mediocre damage onto adds, and this ends up being not worth the corruption investment. Echoing Void remains an option if it's the only one, otherwise Gushing Wounds, Twisted Appendage are good single target options, but still not better than the Devour Vitality one we just mentioned. Twilight Devastation will be your best AoE option and the most expensive one, I believe, so weigh in the pros and cons. Although to be honest, soon your cloak will be so strong enough to support your biggest options, so don't be too hasty to cleanse anything just yet. When you open on a boss, cast a Regrowth before the combat starts. Pop Berserk and Tiger's Fury right before the pull and go into stealth. Start with Rake, then Rip. Cast Shred until you get to 5 combo points, then use a Ferocious Bite. This opener is specific for Sabertooth and Blood Talent builds. The Regrowth prior to combat will make your stealth empowered Rake even stronger from the Blood Talent, and since your next spell is Rip, it will also be empowered from the Blood Talent. Since combo points don't increase its stick damage, just the duration. By the time Rip falls, you would have refreshed it with a 5 combo points Ferocious Bite thanks to Sabertooth. Without Blood Talent, you just ignore casting Regrowth, while with Predator you will manually have to refresh Rip, but the rest of the opener pretty much stays the same. The general priority in single target, meaning the ideal ability to use based on all of the conditions that can apply, is as follows. Use Regrowth with the Predatory Swiftness proc to maintain Blood Talent, only at 4 or 5 combo points though, to ensure that at least one stack of the 2 can be applied to your finisher. Cast Tiger's Fury and Berserk on cooldown. Maintain Rip 100% of the time on your target. And with Sabertooth Talented, you will always refresh it with Ferocious Bite after the first cast anyway, so as long as it doesn't drop, Rip that is, you will never have to recast it. Maintain Rake up whenever possible. Use Thrash here only if you have Wild Flesh Rending in your Azerite pieces. Use Brutal Slash next to generate combo points, and if not, use Shred instead. A few mentions here. Without Sabertooth, again, refreshing Rip has a higher priority than casting Bite, if Rip is about to fall off. Thrash is only worth casting if you have Wild Flesh Rending, since you will use Brutal Slash anyway. As for Berserk, casting it on cooldown is good if you don't know how long the fights are, to plan your usage and you don't want to waste 1 or maybe 2 casts of it. Get ready, cause the AoE rotation is a doozy. Apply Thrash, use Swipe to generate combo points, Primal Wrath to consume combo points, and finish up with liking and subscribing to our channel. There's a lot more that Feral can offer you, and we only scratched the basics. Shout out to Guiltius who helped us with the video. He is the author of the Wowhead Guide and one of the big boys in the Druid Discord community. You should also check the Feral section for advanced tips and spreadsheets that can go into a lot of details about how to best perfect your playstyle. Kitties of Dream Growth, you guys are beasts, pun intended. And we cannot end the video without a quick shout out and thanks to our patrons, guys. Thank you so much. Time and time again we say this, but we do really mean it. Thank you for supporting our content. All of this wouldn't be possible without your help as well. And if you are interested in supporting us a little bit more, check the details down below. There are a couple of links to our Patreon page and some merch that you can check, and maybe there's something that you like. Thank you for watching the video. We hope it helped, and we'll see you in the next one.